so going to question number 2 of May 2025 paper 4.2. This is a simple hash table question, so we'll be attempting this. So the question is pretty straightforward. There is a program that stores data in a 1D array of records, which is called a hash table. The array has space for 200 records. Each data item is stored in a specific index of the array that is calculated using an algorithm. The index is calculated from the key field using the formula key mod 200. If two fields generate the same index, then there is a collision, as is the case in the hash tables, and any records that have a collision are stored in a second array pair. Okay, so whenever there is a collision, that means we have to store the data in another array which is called the pair. The array has space for 100 records. When a collision is detected, the record is stored in the next free space in spare. So that means we'll have to have some sort of an index here as well that will keep a track of the values that we are currently using right now. Okay, now then the next part we have is the pseudocode is given here. We have tried the program code for this. Okay, and whenever we have records, so in order to create records, we need to use object-oriented syntax in Python. So we'll do that. This would be question number 2. So the first thing that we need to do in this case is that we have to create and declare this record, which is key item 1 and item 2. So let's go ahead. So it's called new record. There's key item 1 and item 2. There are 3 items in this supposedly. So we'll have a class record, and then we'll have a constructor. So define init dash dash, and then we'll have self. Okay, followed by we need to have 3 parameters. We have key item 1 and item 2. So let's call them k, I1 and I2, and then we need to give these values to our attributes. Self.key is equal to k capital is equal to k, and then self dot item 1 is equal to I1, and then self dot item 2 is equal to I2, like this. I believe these were the names. Yes. Okay, so then we have declared this, and that's the whole answer to this question. You need to use a class if the language does not support it, so that is the case in Python. Also, we need to always tell the data types of what we're using right now. So in this case, we have this would be an integer, then this is also an integer, so all 3 would be integers, like this. Okay, then in the next part we have, so we have to paste this in the evidence. I'm not going to do that. So write program code to declare the global array, hash table and spare. Okay, in order to declare these arrays, we simply have to just make the declaration code for it, and that is also very straightforward. Okay, so for declaration we have to just, because their size, okay, their size is defined, so hash table is 200 and then spare is 100. So we'll go ahead and we'll just declare them. So this will be the main area, or in fact they should be global, so they should be at the top. So I'll just label these that global area maybe. Okay, so hash table is equal to this, and then we have spare is equal to this. Then we'll go back and declare the global arrays. Okay, yes. So to initialize them, so alright, so an empty record has the integer -1 stored in each field. The procedure initialize stores an empty record in each element in the hash table. So we have to write code for initialize now. Okay, in order to do this, they're saying that all the data would be initially set to -1. So we'll just have to look through the hash table, and then we have to set it to all to -1. So this would be our initialize area. So define initialize like this. Okay, as always, we have to reference the global variable, so hash table and spare. And then the question says that they must all be set to -1. So initialize stores an empty record in each element in hash table and the spare. So we need to create a record. Okay, now in order to create a record, the record is supposed to have 3 attributes, and that is what we did here as well. So it would be have a key, an item 1 and item 2, and we'll just set this all to -1. So if I were to create a record, it would look something like this: -1, -1, and -1. So all these -1s will be copied here. Self is just the parameter to the constructor, so we don't use it. So these two would be copied here. Now we have to do it 200 and 100 times. So let's do it for spare. So for I in range 100, and then we have to simply add this into our spare array. So spare dot append, and because we have to do this again in the hash table, so we should actually create it into a variable, so we don't have to copy paste it. Let's call it record item like this, and then we append record item into the spare array, and then we do the same thing for the hash table. So hash table has a size of 200 records. Okay, so for j in range, yes, 200, then hash table dot append record item like this. So with this, the values have been initialized. Okay, then in the next part, the hash table is calculated from the key field using the formula key mod 200. So this is the index that we would be calculating, and this is exactly we will go ahead and put the array. So in simple terms, if this is our 1D array, and if we calculate an index of, let's say, 2, so this is we will go and put the data in. It won't start from 1, then 2, then 3. So hash tables don't work linearly. They work on the basis of the hash that is calculated from the value to generate an index. Okay, so the function calculate hash takes a key field as a parameter and calculates and returns the hash value for the key field. So we have to write the calculate hash. Okay, so this is again a very small function. What we have to do is we have to take in the key. That would be the value. We mod it by 200, and then we get the hash, which would be actually the index that will be generating. So let's try this. This is going to define calculate hash, and in this let's pass in a key. Okay, and then in the next part they're saying key mod 200, and then we have to return it. So return key mod 200 like this. That's it. Okay, then moving on, they're saying now you have to create a procedure insert into hash. So it's a procedure, so the return value takes a record type new record as a parameter. Okay, let's try this. So we have define insert into hash, then we have a record item. It must be case sensitive, and you need to take care of the spelling as well. Use calculate hash to calculate the hash value for the key field in the record. Okay, fair enough. We just have to apply the function here without doing anything else. So as always, we'll first global the values. So we have global hash table and spare, and then we have to calculate the hash value. So they are saying that we should generate it using the calculate hash. So let's call it maybe index or hash value, whatever you want to call it, or hash index or whatever, and then it should be for the key field in the record. Okay, so that would be calculate hash, and we'll pass in the record item. Okay, now if we pass in the record item, that would be wrong, because record item itself is a record which contains 3 attributes. It contains the key, the item 1, and the item 2. So in order to get the key out of here, we need to actually refer to the key attribute. So let's see if we can actually get the key. Okay, so they have not written it explicitly here, but we actually need to write a getter method for this. So calculate hash to calculate the hash value. Check if the hash value index in the hash table currently stores an empty record. If it stores, then store the parameter in the index. If it does not store, then store the value in the spare. You can assume there will be enough value in the spare in the collisions. Write code for inserting to hash. Okay, so for this case, we have to write a getter method, and a getter method is simply that it returns the value of your attribute. So I'll go ahead and go back to the record class, and then I'll define get key, and then there will be the self. So this will be get key, and then will be self here, and then we'll just return self.key. And let's go ahead and make it for all of the other attributes, the two of them, even if we don't really have to use them. And then we go back, and now at this point we need to get the key out. So I'll use the getter method now, get key, like this. Okay, so we're done with this part. Now going back to the question again, they're saying check if the hash value in the hash table currently stores an empty record. Okay, in order to get an empty record, we know that the key must be -1, right? We set these all to -1 initially. So now we have to loop through our hash table, and we have to go to this index, and we have to check if this is, sorry, not loop through it. We just have to see if this index contains an empty record or not. So we'll write if the hash table current index is equal to record item dot get key. Again, we can just get rid of this redundant code. Let's give it a variable, maybe current key is equal to this, and we pass in the current key, and then we check index. Yes, so we go to the specific index now, and we again run the get key method here. Now the logic for that is, let's say we have a simple hash table here. So we have index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have these values here. So maybe we have 25, 77, 82, 12, and 99. So what we did was we tried a value, and then we generated the index value using the hash function, and whatever the value was, we went there and we put some key value there, and otherwise we'll assume that most of them are empty right now. So what you have to do is, if the index that I generate is, let's say, 2, so I'll go to 2 and I'll check, is the key value at 2 equal to -1? If it is not, then it means that this value is, that this index is taken, it is not empty. Otherwise, if I go to a certain index, and then if the key value is -1, then that means the index is empty, and then I can put any new value there. So this is what you have to do. So if the new current index that we generated, we need to get the key, and if that specific key is equal to -1, then this simply means that the index or the record is empty. And since the record is empty, we can go ahead and we can put our new record item at this specific index, record item, like this. So we place the new record in empty index, like this. Okay, so if that is not the case, what do we do then? So the question says, if the index does not store an empty record, okay, this part we have already done. So then they're saying check the index. If the index stores an empty record, store the parameter in this index. Okay, if it does not store, then store it in the spare. Okay, so we've done the first part, now we have to do the second part. Now in order to go into spare, so again, this was, let's assume this was our hash table. Let's say we have the spare array here. So I'll copy these indices just for example, and then this would be the spare, and these are the values here. So again, spare might have some values, maybe we have 55 here, and then we have some -1s, and then some other values. So like the question says, we have to first check if we can store the value in spare, and again we have to make sure that the current index is empty by checking if it is -1. If it is not, then we simply move to the next index. So we have to loop through the whole 1D array. So we will have to then iterate through the whole spare array. So we'll have to go through each element one by one until we find the -1 that we're looking for, and then we place the value there. So that is what we'll do. Now in this case, if that is not the case, then we go into else, and here we'll actually iterate through the spare array, and for that we have to use the for loop. For I in range of, the size of the array was, I believe, 100. Yes, it was 100. So we have to iterate through 100 times. 100, and then we will get the current, let's call it the current key again. So this will be spare current index I dot get key, like this. And then again, if the current key is equal to -1, then that means it's empty, so we place it there. So if current key is equal to -1, then at the current index of our spare, we should put the record item like this. And once this is done, so the loop can technically end, so we can use the break statement here, or we can simply use the return statement. Although it's supposed to be procedure, so we'll just use break, we cannot use return here. So what will this do? It will end the loop instantly, so we don't have to iterate further. So this was part D. Then we have part E. So in part E, the question is now involving some sort of file handling now. So there's a text file called hash data. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the file. So this is going to be hashdata.txt. Okay, so there are a lot of lines here, and they all have 3 values which are comma separated. So probably we have to use some sort of strip and a split function here. Okay, so the text file hash table stores up to 200 rows of data to be stored into the hash table. Each row contains 3 integer numbers separated by commas. Okay, makes sense. So what we have to do here is each of these would be an entry in the hash table. So if we have this value 79, 10, and 5, so if this would essentially be a record. So this would be the key, then item 1, and then item 2. Exactly how we created the format to be of our class, record class, this one, -1, -1, -1, with all the 3 items of key, item 1 and item 2. Alright, so what we have to do is, the first value is the key, the second is item 1, the third is item 2. Okay, the first row in the text file contains this, the key field is this. Alright, same thing again. Procedure create hash table opens the file, creates a record for each row, and then calls insert into the file, and then creates insert into hash, and then creates the hash table. Okay, so this is a pretty simple question. What we have to do is we have to loop through the whole file. We have to split each line, and then we'll get an array with 3 values in it every time. And then at index 0 we'll have the key, then index 1 will have item, and then the other item here. And then as always, whenever we get a file handling question, we have to use exceptions. So this would be part E, and this is called create hash table. All right. So define create hash table. Okay, so no parameters here. So as always, we have to first global them. Now we have to open the file, so try, and we'll have the except. Except would be file not found or something. Okay, in the try method, we have to try to open the file. So f is equal to open. The name of the file is hash data.txt, and we have to open it in read mode. All right. So once we open the file in read mode, then we have to loop through the whole file. We have to read all of these lines, and let's just print them firstmost. So for line in f, print line dot strip. Let's see if it works properly. So we have to call this function as well. Create hash table. We redo it, and it is working fine. All right. So keeping that in mind, then we move on to the next part. In the next part, we have to create a record. So in order to create a record, what we have to do again is we have to split every line into 3 components. So we have to use the split function here. So here we go. We don't need to necessarily print the data, so I'll just comment it out. It's always good to print the data before and after writing the code of any part, so you know what it is doing and how it's working. So let's get current record out. Current record would be line dot split. In fact, first we'll strip it, and then we'll split the values on the basis of a comma, right? Because there is these are separated by commas. We can do it with the chaining method, or we can do it in two ways. So we do it first, then we do current record is equal to line dot split, or we can simply do it in one line. It's totally up to you. All right, so now let's try to print current records, and we must get all the arrays one by one. Yes, we do. So now all of the string lines have been converted into arrays. Now we just need to extract one item at a time. Okay, so now we can get out the key, which would be the current record index 0. So let's say we have 6 to 5, so this would index 0, then index for item 1, then 5, 9, 8, 9, index element 2, index 2. Item 1 would be current record 1, and then item 2 would be this. Or you could have done it directly within the call of calling the, what was the function called? Insert into hash. Okay, so we can do it now, insert into hash, and then we have to pass in the three values, so key, item 1, item 2, like this. Or we could have just done it directly in here. This is just an additional step to kind of make the code simpler. Okay, and then we have to close the file, so it should be f.close like this. Insert into hash. Okay, I think I have added an additional bracket here. Yes, it's supposed to be one parameter, record item, and then record item is supposed to have 3 parameters. So this should be a record item, so we need to call it record, and then in brackets. Now it should be fine. Yes, it's perfectly fine. So just like we created the record above, we have to write the class name record, and then we pass in the 3 parameters, and that is what I've done here. So I think with this the question is done, and in fact let's try to run this at this point. So this should call insert into hash, and when we insert into hash table, so we must have some values in the hash table. Let's see. Let's print the value of hash table. So we have to convert them into integers as well, because in case of file everything is a string. So this should be an integer, integer, and integer. Okay, perfect. Now alright, then let's try to print the hash table, and let's get rid of the other print statement as well. We can bring it back when we need this. And then if I run it again, okay, it says file not found for some reason. So let's see if we have the file in here. Hashdata.txt is there. Okay, and then insert into hash. Okay, let's just print the record till this point, current record. Yes, it is actually printing the records, so there must be some issue with the file. Okay, we'll come back to this in a bit. Okay, so the next part, so there is an issue here when we run the code, and the reason is that we have invalid indices here, and we are using the append function, so it adds all the items to the end of the array. Okay, so we have the procedure print pair that outputs the key field of each element in this pair that does not contain an empty record. So which is very simple. We just go into the functions, and then we have to define print pair, and then we have to output the key field of each element in the array pair that does not contain an empty record. So we need to get the globals here, and then we have to iterate through it, and we need to keep on doing it until it ends up containing an empty record, which would be equal to -1. The key value would be equal to -1. So we can say index is set to 0, and then we have to use a while loop while this pair current index dot, we need to get the key as well. If it is, as long as it is not equal to -1, then we have to simply print the value of the key. So we'll print spare current index dot get key like this, and yeah, and then we keep on going to the next index. So index plus equal to 1 like this. Okay, so this was simple, and then now we have to actually test the program. So the main program should call the procedure to initialize the arrays, call the procedure to create the hash table, and then call the procedure to output the contents of the array, write the program code for the main program. All right, so we just have to call them one by one now. First step we did was we had to initialize. Okay, I think that could be an error because we were not initializing. So we have to initialize. And then they're saying that you have to call the procedure to create the hash table. So we already had done that, create hash table. And then we have to output the contents of the hash table. So that should be the create the contents of the array spare. So we'll call the print spare. Okay, now let's see if it is going to work. Okay, it actually kind of does, but we need to get rid of the print statements. So not printing this. Okay, again we are printing the values. All right, so it says in line 88 now there's an error, and then get key has no. Okay, so get key, what was the right syntax? Okay, G was supposed to be lowercase, so get key and get key. Okay, it works perfectly fine now. So the only mistake that was that we were not calling the initialize function, so it is absolutely correct, right? Okay, and then the question says that we have to test the program and take the output of, so take the screenshot output. Okay, now this is going to be quite a lengthy output, so we have to like take multiple screenshots in here and then put them in the evidence file for the examiner to see. And we have to get the key. Yes, we're getting the key at once, so it should. Okay, so it's actually printing -1s as well. We are not supposed to print -1, so we'll go to print spare and we're checking while spare is not key. So global index 0 while the key is not. Oh, this should be my bad. This should be not equal to -1. Now it should be fine. So we go to the firstmost value, and that is again -1. Okay, interesting. As long as it is not equal to -1, we print the current value and we use get key. So it is printing the current key, which should not be here, so I have to get rid of it. Okay, now it's working fine. Yes, so again, you just have to debug like this. I forgot to comment out the print statement, right? So this is it. We are done with the whole question.